Hello, this webinar is titled Heroism, Bravery, and the Value of Life, and it's a part of the 10-part series on the 100-year anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. It's kind of a complimentary webinar to the one on the 6 stories of heroism and bravery that included stories about Major Archibald Butt, Miss Elizabeth Evans, Benjamin Guggenheim, the bandsmen, the Titanic engineers, and Reverend John Harper. Again, for this short webinar, I'll be using some ideas and narrative from the book, The Sinking of the Titanic, and these concepts include things on bravery, courage, morality, faith, manhood, womanhood, and Western culture, and I'll present them as it's told in the book. If you find these ideas troubling or offensive, you can choose not to watch this webinar, but here we go. Said one survivor, speaking of the men who remained on the ship, there they stood, Major Butt, Colonel Astor, waving a farewell to his wife, Mr. Thayer, Mr. Case, Mr. Clarence Moore, Mr. Widener, all multimillionaires and hundreds of other men bravely smiling at us all. Never had I seen such chivalry and fortitude, such courage in the face of fate, horrible to contemplate, filled us even then with wonder and admiration. The one alleviating circumstance in the otherwise immitigable tragedy is the fact that so many of the men stood aside really without the necessity for the order, women and children first, and insisted that the women should first have places in the boats. There were men whose word of command swayed boards of directors, governed institutions, disposed of millions. They were accustomed merely to a pronouncement, and a wish was granted them. Thousands of dollars were posted at their bidding. The complexion of the stock market altered hue when they nodded. They bought what they wanted. But these men stood aside. One can see them, and gave place not merely to the delicate and the refined, but to the scared Czech woman from the steerage department with her baby at her breast, to the Croatian with a toddler by her side. There was no debate as to whether the life of a financier, a master of business, was rated higher in the scale of values than that of an ignorant peasant mother. Whether she wore rags or pearls, a life was given for a life, with no assertion that one was priceless and the other comparatively valueless. Chivalry is a mild appellation for their conduct. Some of the vaunted knights of old were desperate cowards by comparison. A fight in the open field or jousting in the tournament did not call out the manhood in a man, as did the waiting till the great ship took the final plunge, in the knowledge that the seas round about were covered with loving and yearning witnesses whose own salvation was not assured. To many of those who went in the boats, it was harder to go than to stay there on the vessel, gaping with its mortal wounds and ready to go down. It meant that, tossing on the waters, they must wait in suspense, hour after hour, even after the lights of the ship were engulfed in appalling darkness, hoping against hope for the miracle of a rescue dearer to them than their own lives. And in one of God's providences, the seas were calm after the sinking of the Titanic, so that the rescue boats were able to wait and to be rescued. And this is certainly not true of the North Seas at all times. It was the tradition of the Anglo-Saxon heroism that was fulfilled in the frozen seas during the black hours of Sunday night. The heroism was that of the women who went, as well as the men who remained. Thus, one of the great ironies of the Titanic tragedy is this. It's that she became a symbol of duty and faith. Husbands literally looked into the eyes of their wives and children, whispered tender last words, and lowered their families into lifeboats with the full realization that they would never see them again. It was this spirit of sacrifice that motivated First Lady Nellie Taft, the wife of President William Howard Taft, to honor this spirit by mounting a national campaign to raise funds for a monument which would carry the inscription, "To the brave men who gave their lives that women and children might be saved." This monument is about 1.5 miles south of the Washington Monument. The structure was built in Washington, D.C. using the $1 donations of American wives. Mrs. Taft explained, "I am grateful to do this in gratitude to the chivalry of American manhood." C.S. Lewis in the 1940s, several years later, not writing about the Titanic, but a great author in his period, wrote about this concept of men without chests as a encouragement to us to understand where this kind of manhood comes from. And he was asking this question even as manhood was diminishing at his time. We make men without chest and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and then bid the geldings to be fruitful. And he was speaking about how manhood was in decline and the value of manhood already in the 1940s. And he's a profound author of a book, many books, The Chronicles of Narnia, but Mere Christianity as well. As we wrap up this webinar, I'll use this last line of the dedication again. Of each of them, let it be written, as it was written of a greater one, he died that others might live. And here are our questions for consideration. What is bravery and where does it come from? What kind of worldview values life? Are all cultures the same? Has Western culture lost something valuable? Do we have men without chests in society today? I'll refer you to these two resources that I've highlighted before, the 21-Day Faith Experiment and the U.S. Civics Training Center. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.